All right, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the third meeting in our series of thinning webinars for the Capital Region. I'm Mike Bastow, Tree Fruit Specialist with the Eastern New York Commercial Horticulture Program. Before we begin, I'd like to once again make a shout out to our commercial sponsor, Owesco in Conway, Massachusetts, with a big thank you for their financial support for our series. The people at Owesco would like to thank everyone for this opportunity and remind you that they're here for you with parts, service, and sales support through these stressful times. Owesco staff can be reached at 413-369-4335, Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. So our focus today will be on thinning strategies for 15 millimeter and beyond with Dr. Terence Robinson of Cornell University Agritech. This meeting also provides us all an opportunity to discuss and ask questions about the thinning applications that we've been making so far. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Terence.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to start our discussion with just a little bit of roundtable talking about the development of the crop in the Capital Region. I wish I had been able to travel there to personally assess the crop, but I wasn't able to. So I'm going to start first asking you, Mike, if you could give us your impressions, and then anybody else who's willing to comment that might help guide some of the discussion we're going to have in a few minutes. So, Mike?
Sure. So overall, I would say, it depends a lot, orchard to orchard, block to block, variety to variety. Some orchards, looking back a little bit earlier at those potential frost events that we had were hit harder than others. In general, I would say in the orchards that did have some injury in the low spots, when I was down there on Friday, you could see that some of the kings in the lower portions of the trees were missing. But generally, higher up in the tree, still a considerable of crop setting up as of Friday. So since then, a few farms might have gotten some additional thinner applications on. So I haven't been able to, reassess after that. But in general, at that point, I would say, even in the blocks where there was some injury, higher in the trees, there were still pretty good set.
Okay. Is there any grower that would like to comment briefly about what it's looking like?
Looks like some of the, where we had applied Maxella Excellus to the Gala and to the Fuji, that seems to be working, thinning out pretty nicely. After our last meeting last week, we had no good thinning weather until Sunday night, or no weather without wind, I guess I should say. So at that point, we just put on 5 parts plus, I believe, 15%, if I remember the model correctly, plus 7 on basically everything except for the items that got the Excellus. And at this point, I'm not sure we can really tell whether that's worked or not.
So remind me again the date that went on, Kevin?
It went on Sunday night, Monday morning of this week, which was
we're Wednesday,
first.
Just a couple of days ago then, right?
Yep.
Okay, is there anybody else that would like to comment? So Kevin mentioned that some blocks had some frost, and I did visit your farm, Kevin, but it was really early. But are you seeing any evidence of frost damage?
Not really. I mean, occasionally you'll see a king that's not there, but it's very rare.
Okay. So one other question I have is that did anybody apply thinners during that heat of the previous week? Sounds to me like, Kevin, you waited until Monday to put that spray on.
We did, yes. I think all of the, as we ran the models, it was all telling us, actually do not thin.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks for that. If anybody else would like to comment, jump right in. Otherwise, I'll share a few thoughts and a few slides with you. Let me see if I can get this to share the screen.
I'll also just mention, Terence, we are running the fruit growth model in one Gala block down at Kevin's. So we did our first measurements on Monday. We'll be getting the second ones tomorrow. And generally, just looking at that first day of measurements, it looks like our biggest fruit there, some of them are now at 15 to 14, but on average they're still about 9 millimeters, with the smallest still being down in the 5 to 6 range on those laterals.
Yeah, so I saw that data right before the meeting started. Well, that's the data you sent me, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so I looked at that just before the meeting started, and I'll comment in just a few minutes about it. Maybe I should have started with sort of the carbohydrate model. Maybe I just jumped to that slide if I want to do that. I just ran the model earlier today, and for several reasons, to look at what the temperatures are forecasted to be like in a thinning window, but also to look at this column here, where in the last number column, to see the degree day accumulations for Clifton Park in this case. And so you have been in the prime thinning window since Saturday, and then Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. And so we're getting to the end of that prime thinning window for the normal 10, 11, 12, 13 millimeters. And in fact, Mike's fruit measurements would indicate that we're just leaving that window. So I've titled this thing here that we're now considering in this meeting the next step, if needed. Now, it really would be helpful in making that decision if we had somebody to give us some fruit growth rate data. And Mike's going to get that in the next, tomorrow is the second measurement? So
right.
that I could look at that tomorrow afternoon, and then we could have maybe an email or something to just indicate what it's looking like. But that normal 10 to 13 millimeter spray window is kind of past, and now we're looking forward at the last window for thinning if we need it, which will be coming up late this week or maybe even early next week based upon the degree day accumulations that I'm seeing from the model. Now, in this particular window, it's only if needed. Many years we don't need any spray at this window, and what we get out of the 10 millimeter, 12 millimeter spray is enough. So this year things are all over the board because of the frost in some blocks. Maybe didn't need much thinning. Other blocks had little frost damage, but could have gotten substantial thinning from the petal fall spray and then the 12 millimeter spray, and could be done. In fact, I'll just comment briefly that Mike was on the video yesterday for the Hudson Valley folks, and we had data just from the Hudson Valley lab, and it looked like they had got a fantastic thinning job on Gala at the Hudson Valley lab with both the petal fall and the 12 millimeter, and didn't need much more. But many other growers are still kind of hesitant that maybe that looked like the crop was way too heavy. But this morning I got data from the Chris brothers, and they essentially have accomplished almost a perfect thinning job without the need for this 18 millimeter spray. So it may turn out that most of you will not need this conversation today, but let's wait. Let's see if we can get some fruit growth data to back that up. So based upon the data that Mike took, the largest kings on Gala in not Hudson Valley, I forgot to change that, in the capital region are around 15 millimeters. So that's just entering this final thinning window if we need it. Now, going back to this carbohydrate model output for Clifton Park, the final thinning window generally starts around 300 degree days. So today's Wednesday, we're at 240. Thursday, we go to 260. Friday, 278. But Saturday, we kind of get to that window. And then Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday are all within that final thinning window if needed. Now, the windows are typically organized. The way we organized this program was to have 1 week between each window. So let's just use Kevin's example. He sprayed on Monday, so he could be looking at next Monday for an additional spray if needed. And that gives time in between those windows to try to assess the response by measuring fruitlet diameter. If we look forward at the kinds of temperatures we'll be looking at and the kinds of deficits or surpluses we'll be looking at, by Saturday, the temperatures are mild. They're not hot. They're just perfect. They're mid 70s, 80 on the 9th. Also, nighttime temperatures are not excessively warm. We worry when nighttime temperatures are above 60. Now, if you look back on the 29th, I copied just one line out of that heat wave, a nighttime temperature of 68. That high nighttime temperature is what contributed and drove this minus 100 carbohydrate deficit. You come down here and it's not quite as warm, it's only 80, but a nighttime temperature in the 50s and bright sunshine, the 24 megajoules in the third column on the 9th indicates it's going to be bright. That gives us carbohydrate surplus. Those kind of perfect conditions for the tree to produce carbohydrates. And so what we're looking at for that window, say Saturday, Sunday, Monday, or Tuesday, is relatively mild thinning from any chemical we put on. If you need substantial thinning, once we get to that point, you'll have to be putting on a full rate and maybe increasing that rate slightly. Now, if we think about thinners that work at that big fruit timing, when the kings are 18 and the other laterals are 14 and 15, the best results that we've ever had are with Maxellin 7 with some oil. Now, we've tested the other two, NAA 7 and oil and ethyl and oil, but with more erratic and less consistent results. Let me first discuss NAA. When fruit diameters exceed 15 millimeters, NAA rapidly loses its effectiveness on causing thinning. And in fact, the tree becomes very insensitive to it by 20 millimeters. That's why we can spray NAA, for summer return bloom without having any worry about thinning. So when we're in that 18 millimeters, there's a limited effectiveness of NAA. The 18-year study we did where we sprayed every year all the way to 18 millimeters, we got some decent thinning out of NA7 at those timings on just a few years. Most years we got very little thinning out of the sprays with NA7. That same 18-year study, we also compared Maxellin 7, and we got more consistent. It certainly is not as effective as at 12 millimeter, but it still will thin. And then in more recent years, we've been adding a pint of oil to no oil, and the oil always helps get thinning once fruits are bigger than 15 millimeters. Lastly, we've compared ethyl and oil a number of years. If it's hot, we get substantial thinning out of ethyl and oil. It's cool, we get almost nothing. It's one that is a little bit unpredictable to me, and that unpredictability to me is what leads me to not recommend it. It can be good, but it can also be really hot and take off way too much fruit, big fruit. I will add that we do spray ethyl for return bloom on Honeycrisp. It's one of the two options. In fact, it's one of the options I like the best, but generally we wait till about 25 millimeters. I will add there's a few people out west, I think they're crazy, but maybe they're not, that are starting mild doses of ethyl right now, not for thinning, but for return bloom. So, well, I shouldn't have even said that because I haven't really tested it at this earlier. I've tested it for thinning at higher rates, but as far as return bloom, we haven't done that work, but it's part of what we're doing this year is why it's on my mind. I probably shouldn't mention anything until we test it. But nevertheless, I would suggest that if you're looking for more thinning, late this week, early next week, that you consider Maxell 7 and oil. So let's talk about the next few days. If you didn't spray recently, and it's been about a week since you sprayed, there's a thinning window right now. You don't have to wait. But I think the real thinning window for those that sprayed last weekend, Saturday, Sunday, or Monday, starts again on Saturday. So we'll be at that 300 degree days, not today, Saturday. But during that time, there's moderate temperatures, nothing to worry about. The moderate nighttime temperatures are good in the sense that it's not risky. No great carbohydrate deficit to help with thinning. So if you still need substantial thinning, you've got to put on a full dose. Now, I noticed that Mo Tugas is on, and he reminded me to be a little more clear. And so I want to just comment about the dose that I'm suggesting. We would suggest the basic dose on a tree row volume dilute basis would be 64 ounces of Maxell per 100 gallons dilute, and a pint of 7 per 100 gallons dilute, and a pint of oil per 100 gallons. But you notice on that last one, I didn't put tree row volume dilute equivalent. Now let me explain. For a mature tall spindle orchard that isn't hedged, that's just kind of a fully grown tall spindle, they often measure out 190 to 200 gallons. Let's just say they're 200-gallon dilute volume trees. So I'm suggesting 64 ounces for every 100 gallons of dilute volume. So you'd need to put on twice that. You'd need 128 ounces to go on an acre of that tall spindle orchard. Now that part is really clear. The next part, what about the 7? Do you concentrate the 7? For years I've said, well, I don't think we really need to, because only the first pint is soluble in water. The second pint you might put in the sprayer is just mixed and deposited on the leaf, and it sits there waiting for some re-wetting. Now, I'm suggesting that this year you go ahead and concentrate that for this late timing, just because if you really need thinning and it's kind of mild weather, that might help a little bit. But the oil is not concentrated. If I suggest here just 1 pint for every 100 gallons, you have a sprayer that has 500 gallons, you put in 5 pints and no more. Even if you're only spraying, less than 100 gallons of water on 200-gallon trees, it's just that amount of concentration in the water that we're looking for. Now I want to stop for a minute and ask if that creates more confusion or if it is clear enough to everybody. If you have a comment or question, hopefully Mike's monitoring the chat questions.
So Terence, we do have one question, 2 questions that have come into the chat box. Mo Tugas has said he's clear on that now, but this question does relate into the dosage a little bit. So from Raymond, we have tomorrow he's planning to spray his orchard. Fruit sizes varies from 4 to 15 millimeters. He's planning to use 7,4-F for thinning and some additional plum curculio control. He'd also like to use 1% horticultural oil to cover parasilla eggs. The 7 label says carb oil will also kill those. So question 1, the carb model refers to standard amounts of thinner. So he's wondering, what is the standard amount? The label says he can use 2 to 6 pints per acre. For him, that means also per 100 gallon. Question 2, is his intended mix of carb oil plus oil okay to use without phytotoxicity issues?
So let me see if I can get all those questions. So first, the easy one is, what is the standard rate? We have written what I consider the standard, or I have written it, what I consider the standard rate in the Cornell Recommends book. So you should have that and look up for each variety what I consider the standard rate. Then when the carbohydrate model says increase by 15% or decrease by 15%, you work off of that standard rate. Now, the second question relates to this insect problem. If you put oil with 7, and that's the only thing in the tank, it is a very effective thinner. And in fact, in Pennsylvania, lots of growers like that, 7 and oil. But if you have NAA in that mix with the oil, you just get way too much NAA into the plant. If it's only 7 with oil, like I said, there's only a certain amount of the 7 that's soluble. No matter how much you dump in the sprayer, more than that, it's not in solution. It's just mixed around and kept in suspension. But only that that's in solution can be absorbed by the leaf and has a physiological effect on thinning. Now, 7 will increase, oil will increase the uptake of that 7 that's soluble. And so you do get more 7 and more thinning. And it's a very safe combination. But if you mix either NAA or Maxell with and the oil, then it becomes very potent. Now, your comment was that fruits size varied a lot. Now, I already forgot. You have to remind me, Kevin. How big were the biggest kings that he was describing?
So for Raymond, his orchard, his fruit sizes were anywhere from 4 to 15 millimeters.
Okay, so let me comment about that aspect. So those that are 15 millimeters are definitely growing. Those that are 4 millimeters are going to fall off. They just are not growing fast enough to stay on the tree. So I don't really care about the low end of that range. A more interesting number to me is what's the average size of those that are growing. Now I calculate that out of the fruit growth rate model. When I run that, I look at, well, the model says all the fruits smaller than a certain amount are going to fall off. And so of those that are still going to stay on there, what's their average size? And in fact, I've thought just through the course of these video conferences we have every week that I'm going to make that little improvement to the fruit growth rate model on Malusim, so the next year you'll see not just the average fruit size, you'll see the fruit size of average of those that are growing and are going to persist is the one that I call them. So if your biggest ones are 15, I'm guessing that the laterals are about 5 millimeters behind that in 10 and 11. So you are still almost within the window of normal thinning, but probably in the next couple of days going to enter this time when they're less sensitive, and the oil would be helpful at that timing. So I'm guessing that given the temperatures that we have predicted on the model, if we go back to that slide, you know, well, it's going to 82 tomorrow. I wasn't even paying attention to that, and 86. So those 2 days, maybe I would not spray the oil. But starting Saturday, let's see, today's Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday the 6th, I think you could go forward with what you proposed without any big worry.
Thanks, Terence. We have
This
another question.
is too long. I don't remember all of the specifics or whether I answered it or not, but hopefully.
I think you covered it. Thank you. We had another question from Kevin come in. Maxell on Honeycrisp at this timing, do you recommend it, or would you just do 7 in oil?
Okay, so on Honeycrisp, I generally like an NAA-based program, and it works extremely well at petal fall and at 12 millimeters. But when we get to the big Honeycrisp sizes, it doesn't work very well. So then I switch to a Maxell 7 program with oil. But a 7, just a plain 7 in oil program would work well. So if you're going to wait about a week, Kevin, before you come back, and then you still have a lot of Honeycrisp, I would suggest a Maxell 7 in oil. If the Honeycrisp have a few too many, but still you want to do some thinning, just a 7 in oil. The good thing about the 7 in oil combination, you can dump all the 7 you want in there. It's just really, it doesn't matter because you can't overdose it because only 1 pint is soluble per 100 gallons. So any more than 5 pints in a 500-gallon sprayer is not really going to change the thinning. It does kill more insects, but doesn't change the thinning. Okay, well, that was kind of my last slide, and then I just wanted to have an open discussion. So let's keep going on the discussion and see what other thoughts people have.
All right, great, thank you. Any other questions or comments for Terence at this time? Feel free to unmute yourself and ask directly. There's only a handful of people on today, so you know you're more than welcome to discuss with the group directly.
Terence, I have a question on like Cortland at this point. Where you don't need bigger, would you just do the 7 in the oil? And same thing on like Paula Red.
So they're two different varieties, in my mind, quite different. I think 7 on Cortland is always troublesome to me. It seems like it starts taking off really big fruit, and there'll be 25 millimeters and still falling off. So I don't like that combination. I would hope you were going to tell me, Kevin, your Cortlands were perfect after the NAA spray they received earlier, and we don't need more on Cortland.
I'd be lying if I said that.
Okay. We didn't get it the thinning we were hoping on the Cortland then. So we generally don't need Maxell on 7, but I probably would just put some NAA and Maxell on them and leave the 7 out. But Paula Red is different to me, and I think you can go in with that and thin it with some 7 and oil and do great.
Okay. And how much NAA would you do with the Maxell?
We like on 7.5 parts
Okay.
with 48 ounces per 100 of Maxell.
Okay.
Now I'm assuming they're set up heavy. The Paula Reds probably are, I presume.
Yeah, it's every one of them.
Oof.
And it doesn't look like they that it touched them.
Yeah, that's what I would suggest.
And on the Paula Red, that would be
Maxell 7 and oil.
next 7 plus oil. And that would be the 64-ounce rate?
Yeah, because at this timing, I'm assuming you're going to wait till Saturday or Sunday when there'll be 18 millimeters. At that timing, it's just much less sensitive to Maxell, and 64 ounces is not scary at all.
Okay. And that 64 ounces of Maxell on Honeycrisp is okay too at that timing?
So the Honeycrisp, you didn't get any thinning, you think, or very little?
I got some, but not enough.
So let me revise down what I would do on Honeycrisp. I'd go the 48-ounce rate. It seems to me that we've had a lot of years of experience with Maxell on Honeycrisp, and they thin fairly easy with Maxell. So the 64-ounce rate, I think, would be too high.
Okay, so 48 ounces Maxell plus 7 plus oil.
Right.
Okay.
Well, I'm really looking forward to receiving the fruit growth rate data that Mike's going to get to us sometime tomorrow. We'll look at that, and that hopefully will give us a more solid basis on these decisions we're trying to make before you have to decide whether to put on the last spray or not.
Yeah, and on the Gala, it's kind of looking like they're pretty good.
Well, good.
At least those in the trial. I have some others that didn't quite take off so much.
Right, just giving it a cursory glance, Kevin, certainly some of the laterals have knocked off, and even a couple of the kings have knocked off at this point. So it'll be interesting to see what it shows tomorrow, but it looks like we might be getting close there.
Yep.
That's what's so great about the fruit growth rate model, because even if those that are looking still pretty decent, they might be in the process of starting to size, and we'll see that from the data.
All right, so any other questions for Terence before we log off today? Well, Terence, I'll ask you one more. I think I know the answer, but just to double check, for the nozzling distribution for these later sprays, same as the 10 to 12 where you would recommend, shutting off your lower nozzles?
Yes. So you'll generally get decent thinning out of the bottom part of the tree with no nozzles open on the bottom third of the bank. If your bank has 9 nozzles, shut off 3. If it's got 10, shut off 3.5, 4. And we've repeated that study at least 5 different years, and we always get more every year we've got more uniform distribution by these later sprays having the bottom nozzles completely off. if these later sprays have those nozzles on, we tend to overthin the bottom, and we have 70% of the fruit in the upper half of the tree and only 30% of the bottom. I'd rather have it closer to 50-50.
Great. And in those rate calculations, would you then still readjust to make sure you're putting out that same rate off of that new water volume since you've shut off those bottom nozzles?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. You're thinking ahead of me, and I'm not thinking very well. I should have said that. Yeah, the mistake comes if you just put in a certain rate and then shut off nozzles. You're no longer spraying what you used to be spraying. Let's assume it was 100 gallons. You're now going to be spraying 70 gallons. So the tree gets 7/10 of what it should be getting. We just want to change where we're putting the 10/10. So I want to still put out the equivalent chemical that we would have at 100 gallons, even though we're only going to be spraying 70% of that. So we have to either re-nozzle or slow down a little bit so that the tree gets more from these same nozzles to make up for those that are turned off.
Terrence, where my sprayer will adjust for the gallons per acre, that's okay?
Yeah, that's great. You have a computer controller on it?
Yeah.
That's even better.
So it doesn't matter what I shut off, I mean, within a certain range, but I can still we're putting on 73 gallons to the acre. And I
If
can
you shut off tree, you can still do 73 gallons?
Yep.
That's perfect. Then you can still get that the chemical out that you want on the tree. Just distribute it slightly differently.
That saves the calculation.
Good. Okay, good luck, everybody. I think before we end, I just want to say that I think some of you are already done thinning, but you just don't know it yet. If you had some frost damage or you had really great response from the thinners that went on last week, you could be done. You really need to make that decision. I like to make it with fruit growth rate data, but if you don't have that, hopefully we'll at least have some data from Kevin tomorrow. But if not, in your own farm, you really should think seriously about, look at it very carefully, say Friday before you might spray on Saturday.
Great. Thank you, Terrence. Yep, and we'll go ahead and once we have that data, we'll be sure to publish that out in one of our alerts as well.
Okay.
And I'd like to thank you, Terrence, for joining us again, and Wesco for sponsoring this meeting. And for anybody that still has some thinning to do, best of luck to you.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Terrence.
Okay, we'll see you later.